So, welcome to anybody who is joining for the first time. This is a kind of follow along practice, so obviously I don't know who you are or where you are or if you're doing this or when you're doing it, so I can't give specific feedback, but you can take this kind of follow along opportunity as an opportunity to explore your own body in movement a little bit, and yeah, just as much as a movement training, as much as articulating and lengthening and mobilizing and strengthening and all those things, it's also a practice in awareness. So very much an invitation to listen to what's possible for you, and use my voice as I'm going along as a kind of guide to what you might do and what you might notice, and only ever do what's comfortable. So I'm going to start lying down today. Actually, no, I'm not. Changed my mind already. I'm going to start standing up. I just want to see what it feels like to stand. And just notice. Notice I'm on a wonky bit of floor. Takes me a while to find a bit of floor I like. So then I'm just standing and with my eyes closed, sensing what I can sense in my body. Thoughts, feelings, sensations. And movement, even in standing there's movement, even in apparent stillness. I notice that I'm bearing weight on a little bit more on one leg than the other. I'm just shifting my weight a little bit now onto one leg and back to the centre. And I just go to that first leg a few times. That was the one that I found easiest. So just repeat that experience a few times. And then I pause. And then I just go to the other leg a few times, see what that's like. And then side to side. Both ways. And then I pause again. I'm just going to look down a little, look up a little. No particular way of doing it. Whatever just feels good. But I'm using my eyes to look at different things. So depending on what I want to look at, how far I want to go, where I want to see, the movement's different. So I'm really thinking specifically about where I'm looking, really looking specifically at different things. Coming up and down a little bit to see different things. And that's all. Then I just look around a little bit, looking once over one shoulder, once over the other. I feel immediately it's easier to look one way than the other in rotation. And then I just look around a bit more. And that's it. Just going to have a lie down. Actually going to make sure that my computer doesn't make that noise again. And then I'm going to lie down. I just sense what it feels like to lie. I notice the contact with the ground. I roll my head a little side to side. Feels quite different for me today, this. Get a sense of the length of my arms and legs, their orientation in space. I bend my knees, stand my feet. Again, just notice what changes in my body, my contact with the ground. I want to come back to what I was doing yesterday, basic rounding and arching of the back, flexion and extension. Adding infinite little varieties with side bending and twisting, but basically concentrating on rounding and arching the back. I'm just going to come up to sitting with my legs long in front of me and very lazily just roll forwards and see how that feels. I'll come up again. I'll do that a few times, change where my legs are a little bit. Do it with my knees open and my feet together. Rounding forwards. Coming back. I'm going to lean back on my hands and instead of rolling forwards with my head, just round my back backwards. Do it again. Just rounding my back. Change my feet because it feels easier for me right now just to push my feet into the ground and help me roll my pelvis back. Sink my chest, tuck my tailbone underneath. And then I just, one more time with my legs in front of me, roll down forwards. And see how that feels. And then I'm going to roll onto my belly. Just rest on my belly for a moment. And then lift my head just a little and lay it down. Just staying very, very lazy, very small. Going to feel like a little blind puppy. Before you can see they can't really see yet, and they just kind of lift their heads and put them down again, and they've got those glazed eyes. I'm not really, my eyes are open, but I'm not really seeing anything. It's blurry. And I can lift and lower my head, and I'm interested to feel what my back feels like. And feel what I feel pressing into the ground. And I rest my head down every now and again. And then I start again. Trying to see down underneath my own armpit on either side. Down towards my own belly button. except I can't because I'm not lifting that far. Up and forwards, turning to the light. Use my hands on the floor a little, using my arms. And I start to come up a little bit higher, just what feels fine, whatever feels good. Looking around a little. Turning, soft pelvis, soft legs. Very ambitionless. And then I roll down and rest again. I'm going to take both my feet to standing, so my toes are standing tucked under. And I've got one hand on top of the other and then my forehead on top of the hands. And I'm just going to lift my bottom away from the floor a little, or rather lift my hip joints away from the floor a little. So then that's me arching in my lower back. So when I was lifting my head, I was intentionally arching in my upper back. If I stick my bottom out a little bit and take my bum up towards the ceiling, then I'm intentionally arching my lower back. And I just let that go. And I do it again, my toes are tucked under, and I just stick my bottom out very gently, very softly. A few times. Doesn't have to be a big movement. And then I uncurl my toes. And I just look forwards again and I see how that feels now. I feel a greater ease in my back already. And I rest my head down. And then again I've got one hand on top of the other and my forehead on top. And I've got my toes tucked underneath, and then one ankle is just crossed over the back of the other. So to start with, I've got both knees on the floor, but just one foot is crossed over the back of the other ankle, and the foot that's on the floor, the toes are tucked underneath. I'm just gonna, my right foot is over my left, the back of my left ankle, so I'm gonna just lengthen my right foot over the top of the back of my left ankle, so that my right knee comes off the floor and my feet start to roll slightly to the left. My heels start to roll slightly to the left and my pelvis starts to roll slightly to the left. And then I come back. So I'm just lengthening my right leg so that I can tilt my legs over to the left. My right leg is crossed over the back of my left one and I'm tilting my legs to the left. And that rolls my legs and it rolls my pelvis a little bit. And then I keep my right foot hooked over the back of my left, but instead I just lift my right side of the pelvis away from the ground. So that means the same thing I was doing earlier, sticking out my bum, but this time I'm just doing it with the right side. And I try to do both again, but with my legs crossed. And then I just try to lift just the right side of the hips away from the ground, sticking out the bum on the right side. And then I just see, can I roll my pelvis to the left by sticking my bum out like that? Rolling my pelvis to the left as I stick my bum out, and I can move my head, I can turn my head on the floor however it's comfortable. Rolling my pelvis with my bum sticking out. And then I go back to what I was doing before, which was starting with my right foot hooked over my left ankle. Both knees are on the floor to start with, but then I lengthen the back of my right leg so that my right leg lengthens and the front of my right hip also opens, and I roll with my pelvis to the left a little as my heels roll to the left. So I'm still rolling through the centre. lengthening the top of my lengthening the back of my right leg on top of my left. In order to roll my pelvis, I feel my belly softening, I feel my breath softening. And then I just uncross my legs and pause and rest. And I'm going to just test lifting my head again. I feel it's easier for me to lift. It's interesting, it feels easier for me to look over my left shoulder. I feel the front of my right side of my pelvis pushing into the ground. Not so easy for me to look over my right shoulder because the front of my side of my left pelvis isn't really opening up into the ground. So I feel it's easier to lift one way. And just rest down again and relax. And then I tuck both toes underneath again, both feet, the toes are tucked under, with both feet on the floor still, and my knees on the ground. Again, I just stick my bottom out a little bit and then let it come down. I do that a few times. When my pelvis comes down to the floor, my pubic bone comes down to the floor and my legs lengthen, my knees come off the ground, and then when I stick my bottom out, my hips fold and my knees fold and my knees press into the ground. I feel that's much easier on my right hand side. I feel the right hand side of my hip is folding and opening much easier than the left. I just rest again. Then I tuck both both toes under again. This time I'm going to put the right ankle over the back of the the right foot over the back of the left ankle. No, I gotta start again. Both toes are tucked under, both feet. I keep my right toes on the ground and I just pick up my left foot and sling it over the back of my right ankle. And I just start to see if can I lift the left side of my pelvis away from the ground a little in this position. So to lift the left side of my pelvis away from the ground, that means I'm slightly sticking out my bottom, I'm rolling a little bit to the right. I've got both knees on the ground still. Can I stick out the left side of my bottom and fold in my right hip, in my left hip joint? And then I just relax for a moment. And then in the same organisation, so my right foot is on the floor with the toes tucked under and my left ankle is slung over the back of my right ankle. And I start to just push my left leg long so that my left knee comes off the floor. So I'm just gently sliding the front of my left ankle against the back of my right ankle so that I go from having both knees on the floor to having just the right knee on the floor. And I can feel this sliding contact between my legs. And if I go a little softer with it and a little further, then I feel that as I push my left heel over to my right across the back of the right ankle, that can turn me a little. So I can lift the left side of my pelvis away from the ground at the same time as lengthening my left leg and taking my left knee away from the ground. And I just let my legs roll. And I take a rest. And I come back and staying on the same side, right toes on the floor, left foot over the back. I go back to keeping my knee on the floor to roll my pelvis to the right. My left knee, both knees are on the floor. My left knee slightly presses into the floor to lift my left hip away from the floor and roll my pelvis to the right. And then I keep going, but this time lengthening my left leg so that my left knee comes away from the floor. And I try to just slow down a little bit. I feel I'm rushing a little.
want to notice my belly on the ground. I want to stop efforting. I think I was efforting in my back a little bit, and I think I could soften, loosen my back a little. And then once I push my left knee into the floor to lift the left side of the pelvis and roll the pelvis a little to the right. And then once I lengthen the back of the left leg to roll my pelvis to the right with the left knee off the floor. So the same things I've been doing, but I'm just alternating between one and the other. Feeling what the difference is. And then I want to relax again, just rest. And I come back to lift my head again. Now I feel it's easy to turn to the right as well. So now that I feel a little easier bending in the whole length of my back, I'm going to start this little crawl. So I'm looking over my right shoulder towards my right knee, and my right knee pulls up a little bit. And then I look over my left shoulder to my left knee, and my left knee pulls up a little bit. This is like before being able to crawl. And my belly's out on the ground and I'm supported with my arms. My arms can be further in front of me, so I've got more of my chest on the ground, or they can come more underneath me. So I've got more of my belly on the ground and less of my chest. And I'm just letting my pelvis roll. Actually, incidentally, because I've got tight quads, I get a nice roll over the quad muscle in the thigh at the same time. And I do the same thing but looking underneath my elbow now. So rather than looking over my shoulder towards one knee when I go side to side, I look under my armpit. So that means when I look under my armpit, I'm rounding my back a little bit. And the next time that I look under my armpit towards my knee, I just keep bringing my knee up and push my elbows into the ground, and I can come up with both knees then, just crawling up with my elbows on the ground. And I just rock my pelvis around a little bit, rock my knees around with my elbows and knees on the ground. And I go forwards and backwards a little bit. I tuck my toes underneath, see how that feels. Looking underneath my armpits, towards my knees all the time. And then I see, how can I come out of that again? So I have to lengthen one leg and look at one knee under my armpit. And then I can lengthen both legs away, and I'm back in my arch, crawling like a baby. Or slithering like a baby. And I want to rest down a little bit. And then I've got to go the other way, so I'm going to keep slithering like a baby and keep turning to look under one armpit and under the other armpit. And last time I brought up my right knee to get me to crawling, so now I'm going to bring up my left knee to get me to crawling. I actually used the crown of my head on the floor to do that as well. And then I'm just going to roll around between these points, my knees, my elbows, the crown of my head. Circling around on the crown of my head a little bit. Softly, not too much weight going through my neck, but a little bit. And I feel I can just get a little bit of pressure through the top of my head here. I bring my hands to the floor for a bit more support. I want my knees around. And I want more pressure in my head, so I've tucked my toes underneath and I've lifted my bottom. And I can just walk my feet around. Get a nice little bit of lengthening up through the back of the legs there. I bring my knees down quite close to my face, so that I'm quite rounded. My knees are close to my face. I bring my lower arms back down and I cradle my head with interlaced hands. So I'm curled up into a little ball. My hands are cradled around the back of my head. My elbows are touching my knees. My toes are tucked under and my back is round. And a few times I just try to lift my pelvis, and that rounds my back a little bit more. My head is hidden inside my t-shirt now. I can see my belly lifting up towards the ceiling and then sinking down. Lifting my pelvis, my belly lifts, and then I sink down again. I want to tip more weight onto my head again. So I lift my pelvis off the floor altogether with my elbows here. We'll just have a little wave around with my legs, just seeing what's possible, what feels good. I'm going to do a nice big circle with one leg, challenging my balance. And then of course I want to do the same thing on the other side, so do a nice big circle with the other leg, challenging my balance. And then I want to come down and I just slither all the way onto my belly and take a rest. I look forwards again, lifting my head just a little, feeling my chest against the ground. My chin is still on the ground, that's how little I've lifted my head. I really just like feeling the pressure through the front of the chest. Breathe into that. And feel my back expanding as my chest presses into the floor. And I look up a little bit further. I just come back to this little kind of blind puppy style, looking around, so that I can just lift my head, not really see anything, not really have any expectations. I surprised myself to find that actually I can now lift myself quite high, pushing my pubic bone into the floor to come quite high. So then I feel my glutes are engaged. That feels quite nice. And now I'm just this little puppy-like, exploring where to look, exploring what happens in my chest and my belly. Trying to be really gormless. Looking around. Oh, and then I'm rolling onto my back. And I notice my contact with the floor. How I'm settling into the ground. I bend my knees and stand my feet. And I feel my contact here. And I roll onto my side, coming into the little fetus position. I want to hold both feet. My knees are tucked up towards my face. My face curls in towards my knees. Have a little wriggle of my hands and toes. Just warm up my toes a little bit, squidge around. And then I stay in that little beetle and I roll over to the other side. Rounded back, head lifted, holding onto my toes. And I just curl up as much as I can. And roll through the back. Onto the other side again. Curling up. One side to the other. I'm hugging my knees now. And I stay up and I interlace my hands behind my head. And I want to come into some sit-ups, upper abdominals. I leave my knees off the floor. My knees are wider than my feet. My hips are slightly externally rotated and my feet are flexed. I'm coming up. I'm opening and closing my elbows every time I come up. Just a little. So my hands can help me. Trying to stay soft around my hips. It's hard to hum at the same time. It's easier to sing actually than it is to hum. Interlace the fingers the other way and I just keep going. And I want to start being a bit more specific. I just take a rest for a second. I want to start thinking of sending my elbows beyond my knees, over the top of my knees to my shins. It's a little harder reach. So my feet are just off the floor. My knees are a little bit wider than my feet. My feet are flexed. I don't start in a neutral alignment of the spine particularly, but just easy and soft. And I start to come up and try to look beyond my knees. I won't get there. That's okay. But I'm trying to think up and over with my knee elbows. Up and over. Up and over. Up and over. Up and over. I'm speeding up. Just a little. And coming all the way down every time. Between each one, I let my elbows go down to the ground. So every time I do it, I'm doing my full range from open chest with elbows on the ground to picking up the elbows, closing the chest, drawing the belly in. I'm going to just not come all the way down so I can do some faster ones. Change the alignment of my knees a little bit. Taking my knees into parallel a little bit more. Feeling my upper abdominals are really working. Opening and closing the front of those ribs. Drawing my ribs down over my belly. I want to do some slower ones to open my elbows all the way up and come back. I'm just doing that because I felt I don't want to start straining in my neck, so I'm making sure that when I go fast, I'm still able to release my neck afterwards. Now that I'm going slower again, I notice I can come up higher, but it's feeling muscular effort. And I'm staying at the top of my range and I just want to finish with some tiny little pulses, going higher, 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 and trying to leave my pelvis fairly stable. So you can see probably if you look at the camera, I'm sliding inside my own skin on the floor because I'm not bringing my knees in and tucking my tailbone under, trying to leave my pelvis stable. But as a result, I'm sliding around inside my own skin and rocking up and down. And these little pulses are hardcore. And then I just add in the bottom end, so exactly what I said I wasn't doing, I'm now going to do. Tucking my tailbone under, little crunches. And down. Rest. Why did I want to do that? I don't know. Some sense of duty, probably. I roll my head side to side. That rolls nice and easy now. I feel I'm, again, lying on the ground a little more. I'm a little longer now, rather than just spread out. I feel a little longer. I'm going to come back to lying on my side. Now on my side, I'm going to start moving from rounding to arching my back. I'm going to use my top arm and leg to help me. So my bottom arm and leg are kind of stuck to the floor, they're not much use to me. I just slide my top arm and my top foot along the ground away from me, and that rolls me a little bit open towards the ceiling. So I've got a long line, I end up with a long line of connection from I'm lying on my left side, so it's from my right fingertips to my right toes, gently arching and lengthening, opening the front of my belly and chest and hip on the right side. I just come back in and just draw it in again. And I'm going to do the same thing, so I'm going from this little fetus position where my back is rounded to keeping my left knee and hand on the ground. In fact, keeping all of my hands and feet on the ground, keeping the bottom arm and knee on the ground, arm and leg on the ground, and lengthening the top arm and leg away as I start to gently arch, and I feel the lengthening, opening my armpit, rolling my head to look at the ceiling, and there's this kind of bridge happening from my hand and head to my foot, and I just roll forwards again and bring it in. And I just play with variations on that. There's so many variations about what goes together, how big is the movement. I feel I get all of the interesting stuff quite towards the end of it. So I keep my arm and leg open and long, and I just roll a little to my side and then roll a little to my back. I need to keep my underside of my ribs softer. Noticing that lets my back soften and open a bit more. Do I reach more through my arm, or do I reach more through my leg? How far do I arch them back? Does my leg lead? Does my arm lead? Do they go together? And then I just draw everything in into my little fetus position again, lying on my left, and then roll to lie flat on my back. Do the same thing on the other side, rolling to lie on my right. top arm and leg back, behind me reaching, and then drawing them back in. Notice on this side I didn't really want to take my head with it. I just do what feels okay, what feels possible. I'll try and even it up, so what if my arm and head go just as much as my foot? I'll come back. I'm going from rounding my back in this little fetus position to lengthening my whole left side and then arching my back. And rounding again, and I roll just to lie on my back and rest. I'm going to come up and prop myself up on my elbows. So I've got my elbows and my palms on the ground, my fingertips facing in the same direction as my toes. I'm rounding my back and sinking my chest. And then sticking my bottom out, sticking my belly out. It's really difficult because my shoulders being in this kind of bind because of where my hands are. So I'm just trying to roll my pelvis up and down. It's easier to tuck my turban underneath because then my shoulders drop forwards as my chest drops in, sinks. But then when I stick my bottom out, it's harder because my chest doesn't want to go there. I just play with it. I'll come up onto my hands, so my fingers are still facing forwards. I still round my pelvis both ways, tucking the tailbone under, and then sticking the bottom out. And I just take my attention to my chest. So the drive is from the pelvis, but I'm interested in noticing what's happening in the chest. My shoulders sliding around my rib cage. Can I sense the part of the spine that goes from the base of the neck between the shoulder blades? How can I lift my chest a little bit higher? How can I really soften when I sink? And then come back down onto my elbows. And I keep going here. What's possible here? Take my palms to face the ceiling to help me feel how can I roll my shoulders back. I just play with rolling my shoulders forwards and back a little bit. My pelvis is just passive and responsive. Yeah, but responsive, not passive. Important difference. And then I lay down on my back and rest again, noticing my contact with the floor. I just want to finish again rolling onto my belly. Actually, I'm not really going to start on my belly. I'm going to start on my hands and my knees and forearms again. And play with rounding here. Like I did yesterday, arching and rounding my back. Sending my weight forwards and backwards, different combinations of that. Letting my elbows come off the floor sometimes in different places. And letting my knees come off the floor sometimes in different places. As I shift my weight forwards and backwards, thinking about whether the back is rounded or whether it's arched. Different combinations that are available to me. Rounding and arching. And I can come all the way to kneeling if I want. I can go all the way down into a plank if I want. I can open up into a cobra if I want. When am I rounding? When am I arching? So many variations, just taking my hands, dragging my hands along the floor, feeling what that does to my back. Where is my head? Can I round my back with my neck arched? Can I arch my back with my neck round, with my neck head hanging? What are all these different variations? Where is my weight? Rounding my back, arching my back. Only ever doing what's comfortable, what's possible, what's interesting for me. In this downward dog position, I stay here for a little bit, and I'm really actively tucking my tailbone underneath, drawing my belly in, and that pushes my weight forwards a little bit. And then sticking my bottom out, really trying to get my sit bones as wide as possible, and that's how to lengthen the back of the legs. Then I want to make sure that I'm not just letting my chest drop down. So I just round, and then stick my bottom out, keeping my chest activated and drawing in. Rounding, sticking the bottom out, rounding, sticking the bottom out. When I stick the bottom out, it gets quite intense in the back of the legs, so I don't want to do it too suddenly. Round, just even smaller, these tiny pulses. I feel I'm closing the back of my sitting bones and then opening, closing and opening, closing and opening. And then I bring my knees down again. Just rest. Open and close my knees a little bit. And just round, very lazily, rounding my back, dropping my head, shifting my pelvis side to side, taking my hands side to side. Maybe from here I can go into a big swoop with my arm. And I stay up and I take my pelvis side to side when I'm in this big open extended side bend. I just feel the opening in the side of my pelvis. I have my head wherever it's comfortable, but my upper arm is in line with my ear. So wherever my head is, my upper arm is in line with it. Shifting my weight softly I feel it really opening up as my right arm is over my head in a side bend to the left, so I feel it's really opening up the side of my right hip. And come down and soften. Have a little lazy shuffle around with my weight. Just making myself comfortable. Releasing my legs for a moment before I go to the other side. Shuffling around my pelvis side to side, dropping my head, letting my hands sweep on the floor, and then going over into my second side. For me, that's my left arm reaching over to the right, coming into a big side bend. I can turn my head up and down, but wherever my arm is, it's more or less in line with my top ear, same side ear. And then I just stay wherever I am, and I keep shifting my pelvis a little bit more to the side, one way and the other. Shifting my pelvis around. And softening back down again, all the way onto my belly for the last time. Just give my legs a little waggle in and out, opening and closing my heels. Trying to soften my hips. I take my heels side to side, so my hips roll, my thighs roll. I look forward, I look around. Oh, my little baby, I just come into my baby-like crawl. Looking over one shoulder, looking over the other, supported on my elbows and my knees, on my rolling thighs. As I look over my left shoulder, I bring my left knee up a little bit. As I look towards my right shoulder, I bring my right knee up a little bit. And then I come back into a crawl. And I'm going to come all the way up to standing. And see how do I feel now in standing. So still today. Shift my weight a little bit side to side. Noticing the contact of my feet with the ground. I look around a little. Oh, that feels smoother and more pleasurable now. I feel my weight shifting. And my chest opening. I look over one shoulder, over the other. And then I make that smaller and I just get a little swing through my centre, swinging my arms side to side, very floppy. And then I just take that into a walk. So, that's it. Thank you for joining. You're always welcome to write, to send me messages. Probably Instagram is the easiest way. Otherwise, you can also comment on the website, email, whatever. Share with people. It's always this kind of combination of different practices, lots of functional movement, developmental movement, lots of very soft, gentle stuff, and play with awareness, and always often a little bit more muscular stuff, a little bit of training. It's really suitable for anybody as long as
people can take the challenge of adapting it to themselves. So I'm really trying to provide a loose framework